All right, let's dig in here. This video is going to be talking all about drawing order. I know that my screen looks blank here, but this is going to evolve into a picture at the end so that you can kind of see what order you need to write your code for your shapes so that you can create a beautiful picture at the end. All right, so I just wanted to start off by talking a little bit about the importance of drawing order. Okay, so when we first started creating rectangles in CS Academy, and I'm just gonna go and put some like sample code here just to kind of like start us off here. All right, so let's say I have this rectangle right here, and let's say I've got another. These are going to be kind of random here, just so you know here, but just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. So, all right, when we first started off creating some rectangles in CS Academy, we just had some simple black rectangles. It didn't really matter what order the rectangles were, even if the rectangles overlap. So let's say I kind of just like move this rectangle over. Let's say I make it like around, I don't know, 100 and then move it down. Yeah, see, even though they overlap, it doesn't really matter what order the shapes come in. So I'm switching them around right now. It doesn't really matter what order the shapes come in now because they're all the same color and they all blend together. Okay, even though they overlap, they all blend together, so it doesn't matter. But as soon as we start adding color, so let's say I make this blue, and let's say I make this one red. As soon as we start to add some color here, we will see that order starts to matter. So if I flip this here, and let's say I'm going to, just to make sure that we really get this point here, I'm going to move it down a little bit as well. Okay, all right. So now if I switch these two rectangles and move this one up here to the top, you'll notice that the picture is different. Okay. In this particular case, this is a pretty simple example. So you might be thinking, okay, and what's the point here? The point here is that oftentimes when we are creating these beautiful pictures and animation, we have overlapping shapes. And those overlapping shapes are essential to the quality and the aesthetics of the image here. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to make sure that you guys have an understanding or to teach you all about how to write the shapes in the right order. Okay, so you will notice that the first shape that I draw or write the code for appears in the background. The next shape that I draw, if the shapes are overlapping, appears on top of the shape before. So you can kind of consider that each shape has its own layer. The first code is in one layer. The second code is in another layer on top of that. And then if I were to create another rectangle, let's say I create this green rectangle that's at, let's say 150, 150, and let's say it's really big. Let's say it's got a width of like 200 and height of 200, and I say the fill is equal to green. Notice that it's going to be right on top. Boom. Okay? So you kind of, I believe that hopefully you're starting to kind of get the idea that first shape, first layer, it's in the back. Shape after that, second layer, it's on top of the first shape. And then the last shape that we draw, the last code that we write, that's going to appear all the way at the very front. It's going to be closest to our eyes to see. So I'm going to erase this and let's do a more practical example. Let's say we want to create this beautiful image of, let's say a sandbox, a beautiful sandbox outside, like a sandbox where children play and you've got your bucket and you've got your spade and all these things. That's what I'm talking about here. So if I want to create the background, well, obviously the background is going to have to come first. I'm going to write rect 0, 0, 400, 400. I'm going to say the fill is equal to light sky blue. Okay, boom. Okay, I've got my background here. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time focusing on the actual numbers and the arguments that I'm using here, just because the main focus is understanding the order in which I have to write the code. Next, if I want to create my, let's say my sandbox, and I tell you, this may not be the most perfect sandbox in the world, but I'm sure that you all will forgive me here. I'm just trying to get the point across here. So now let's say I want to create a sandbox after that. Let's say I do something like rect 80, 360, and then let's say I want the width to be about 320, and then the height to be about 40. I'm going to make the fill to be tan. That's going to be the sand. And then I'm going to make the border to be red. That's going to be the sandbox part. And then I'm going to say the border width is going to be 10. I'm making a sandbox in the sandbox. I just realized that. Okay, so let me run this. Okay, so now I've got my, I wanted it to be a little bit over to the right, a little bit more. So let's say 40. There we go. Okay. All right, so now I've got my sandbox here, okay? Notice here that with my sandbox, that again, I wrote my code last here. If I take this and I move this in the front, then my sandbox gets hidden, which is terrible. And this is often a source of so many problems that students have because they're thinking, what happened to my rectangle? What happened to my shape? And it's there, it's just that it's being covered up by this big blue background here. So let's go ahead and put it down here. All right, there we go. All right, and now let's say I want to add some grass here. And I'm going to pause here for a moment and see if you can think. Where do you think, if I want some grass, where the sandbox is on top of the grass, but the grass is on top of the blue background, where do you think I'm going to write the code for the grass? Let me pause here for a few seconds, give you some time to think. Okay, all right. If you guessed that we are going to write the code for the grass in between these two lines of code, you are correct, because we want the grass to be above the light sky blue background, but we want it to be below or underneath the sandbox. I'm going to say fill is equal to green here. I'm going to say forest green just because I like forest green. Run it. Boom, and I've got my grass here, okay? So this is just a quick tutorial. Well, I'm hoping it's on the quicker side of a tutorial, just so you can understand that, again, the first shape that we draw, or write the code for, that appears in the back. Whatever we draw after that will be drawn on top if they're overlapping. And the last shape that we draw, that is going to be the shape that's closest to the front, the shape that's on top of all the rest of the shapes.